Welcome back to Nerdverse Christian Couples. I'm Stephanie.
Yeah.
All right, this is our first time we're doing a full podcast and YouTube at the same time. So here we go. We'll see how this works. We've been doing little blurbs and bits and putting it on YouTube as we're trying to get YouTube back up a little more active. So here we go. We'll see how this works this time. All right, we were at church, and Matthew 13, and I think there's also mentioned in Mark, our pastor was talking about the parable of the sower. So we'll be referencing Matthew 13. And if you look at the thumbnail of today's show, that illustration was actually from the sermon. And I think he called it the parable of the four souls. But it's interesting, as we were having the conversation, I said, we're going to do the four soils today. Oh, you were like, you've already done that. So you went to what, Wilder?
Oh, I didn't know what you're talking about.
Well, that's true. That's half our life. So we had a walk not too long ago where we were discussing what we were going to talk about on the show. So we had this whole discussion about the four soils and how he said we'd already done it.
Oh, so I was talking about the four soils, Jim Wilder's soil.
Yeah, the joy has said and all that stuff. Yeah, but I guess this is more aptly known as what parable of sower. Okay. So that's really what we're going to do today. Because as we were kind of listening to the pastor, I was thinking, well, it's kind of, in context, the seeds are the kingdom of God. Jesus is talking about the kingdom of God. So we completely understand the context of what Jesus is saying. However, we thought it was a good analogy for what heart conditions are in going through the counseling process or doing your marriage work. So we're going to kind of talk about it in that way. So you want to be the reader of the word?
I'll be the reader.
Okay.
So this is Matthew 13, starting at verse 3. And he told them many things in parables, saying, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell along rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But the sun rose, and they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell along the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear.
All right, so we ask that of you, of our listeners today. He who has ears, let him hear.
And there's four soils.
And so we'll kind of skip through the purpose of the parable, and I'll start because I've got this side of the Bible in front of me. The parable of the sower explained. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. As for what was sown on the rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet has no root in himself. It endures for a while, and then when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. As for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. And for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields it, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and another 30. So there's the context. So we were kind of thinking then of these four soils in marriage work. So the first one is the one on a worn hard path. So our pastor kind of gave the analogy of, pick anywhere in a park that says don't walk on the grass or don't walk here, and people have done it over and over time. What's more relevant in our house is we can't grow grass in our backyard because we have a dog that runs the path. Back and forth, and hence no grass shall grow. So I guess the condition of the soil, it's hard and compacted.
Right. So
throw the seeds out.
They just sit on the ground. And rain comes by, washes them all away.
No place to go.
They're gone.
I guess also what comes to mind.
Anything that walks on them scatters them. So that place, that you sowed it, is no longer there.
And also, I was thinking about, and I know Georgia has clay as well, but it made me think back to our first house up in Waxhaw, North Carolina, where the clay that was behind. I mean, you couldn't stick a shovel in it and try. You couldn't do anything.
Wait for it to rain.
And even then, we would have never tried to plant anything in there. I mean, it was just crazy. And I'm sure Georgia's got the hard.
Yeah, Georgia's got clay too.
He got it too, but I don't know. I started having feeling. Actually, the sad thing I was thinking about was when we had a dog that needed to be buried. You were trying to.
That was hard.
Trying to bury
that was a big dog.
Dig a 6-foot hole for a 100-pound dog, and that did not prove to be fruitful endeavor. So this hard path, if we're talking about what does it look like, so let's kind of talk about from the couple or the person on the spectrum, the person who's neurotypical. What does that look like? The seeds, the hard ground. What are some examples of what that might be?
The example of a hard path could be someone that doesn't want to. Well, first of all, just doesn't want to be there.
Oh, that happens a lot.
They don't. Well, there's not a problem. Things are fine. They just deny it. They deny the very reason they're there. They might accept that they need the reason, but maybe they deny that there's a Asperger's thing going on.
Okay, so it could be, that's not me, denial of this label, you're attacking me with this label, this doesn't fit me, you're just trying to pin all the marriage problems on me. That's like hard soil. There's nothing's getting in.
Nothing's getting in. It's just sitting right there on top, ready for it just to be blown away.
And Barbara Grant and I had the conversation way back on the stages of change, that if someone's in pre-contemplation change, meaning they don't think there's a problem, there's nothing to change. We've also kind of called it the tale of two marriages. His marriage is perfectly fine and her marriage is not, and his marriage would be better if she would kind of shut up and stop nagging, and then he would be fine. But there's not really looking at the problem, the unmet needs, the communication, the crying, the hurt. There's dismissal here, denial here. But also, I think from the neurotypical person, not to just pick on the AS side of the equation, I think what this might look like for our neurotypical population is maybe we think it is autism or neurodiversity, but I still expect a neurotypical marriage. I still expect when I pick up that Christian book that says, do this, and here's the 3 paths to happiness and 5 languages of love and all of these things, I still think I'm going to use the same method. And so there's not a willingness to accommodate, there's not a willingness to modify, there's not a willingness to look at things different, because
there's a mental hardness.
Yeah. So it's about, there's absolutely no reason to change. So listeners, there's no reason to go to marriage work at this time. So as an individual, either person could go to do their work. If my heart is pliable and ready and the other person is hard, compacted ground, you're accomplishing nothing. But if you then think the marriage is a joint plot, you can't grow anything in the ground that's hard and workable. It's not going to change the marriage. So you can do your individual work, you could get coaching, you could get support, you can join a group, but the marriage is not changing.
Right.
With the hard soil and the seeds just laying there, because it's
be like trying to grow a thing that grows like underground, and it just kind of grows on one side because the other side is too hard. It never spreads to the other side. You never get that growth of the person that's got some good ground into the other ground, because that other ground is just hard. So you're not going to something that grows wild, like something like mint, just grows everywhere. But if you've got some really compacted stuff going on this side, planting mint by your driveway, obviously, it's not going to grow.
I'd run it over. So I would just run it over when I ran off the driveway.
Yes.
Because I have such great space and depth perception. Oh my.
But I mean, that's kind of the idea. A person can grow, the other person is willing to grow, and whatever one person is growing isn't going to just naturally grow that direction because the other person is hard and unwilling. And
what we have seen in our work is if we come and one person has hard compacted soil and the other person has rich fertile soil in their heart, they're willing to grow, they're willing to do it. Give me the podcast, give me the article, give me 10 books, I'm ready to try it. Their plant is going to grow and they're going to get closer to God and they're going to become healthier, but it still creates an imbalance. Like if you've got two plots side by side and this is hard ground with nothing growing, and one person is seeking God and growing and doing their work and becoming healthier, well, yeah, that's going to cause distance in the marriage, but there's nothing bad about that. The
perspective of the one that isn't growing feels like they're getting run off and left, when the reality is they're doing nothing.
Yeah, for whatever reason, they don't see the problem. Their seeds haven't been planted. And as believers, more than working on our marriage, because we're going to talk in here too about how marriage and sex have become idols. It's crazy to me how that's a thing, but our number one goal as believers is to grow in Christ, right? So we are made to connect with Christ, God first. We are made to be in his image and reflect his image and to grow in our healthy spirituality and then grow
as an act flowing of that.
Right.
We grow towards people.
So we might then, if we can't work on the marriage, work together, but I'm tuning into God and connecting with God, then I might grow away or grow apart. Growing towards God might sometimes grow away from marriage. And I think if you're choosing between the two, I think it's biblical you choose God, right? I mean, God's supposed to be the number one thing. All of us here, it's God first, marriage second. But sometimes marriage gets on that altar of more importance of what is the status of the marriage, or me as a wife or you as a husband, when it really comes back to if both people are serving God and connected to God, there should be some difference there.
That should naturally create a change in behavior, a change in phrasing, right? And that's kind of the fruit of the Spirit, right? When you go to another one where we abide in the vine, you produce quality fruit because you abide in the vine, not because you're detached from the vine.
All right. So if there's hard-heartedness, which could also be unforgiveness, but if someone has a boundary because you're hurting them in abuse, that's not unforgiveness. So we'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about toxic soil. But the hard ground, not plowable, not letting anything in, it's stone hard, there's no growth there. And so if you're a gardener or agrarian, or if you ever try to plant something, hopefully that's ringing true, that you're seeing that. But if that's you and that's your heart, just going to marriage counseling under duress because it looks good, and you want to tell your pastor and you want to tell your congregation we're doing everything to save our marriage, it's for naught. There's not going to be any fruit there. All right, our second soil is what? Is that the one on the rocky path? All right, and that's where
there was no depth and it burned up.
And I think one that says, hear the word, so the first one's kind of been snatched away. Oh, we forgot about a snatching of the way. So a very often snatching of the way that I see is, before we get to the second soil, is a couple's maybe taken months, years to really kind of get into, we think we're neurodiverse, let's not pay all the money necessarily for a big, long, drawn out assessment, but we believe this, we've come to believe this. And then maybe the person who's on the spectrum tells a person or two, we're working on this, or neurodiverse, I think I have Asperger's, or no, you don't. You don't talk to the person with Asperger's. Your spouse is crazy.
Right, think of how good you are at telling you.
Yes, exactly what people say. But, that's a snatching of the way too.
It creates a doubt in what you'd already decided. You were ready to move forward, and then you see the bird ran off with it.
And in some of these cases, some of the couples have gone to 1, 2, 3 counselors where maybe 2 or 3 of them had said, I think this is what's going on. Hey, I think you should check it out. And then, but let's pick a person to do the assessment who's going to make sure that I get the result that I want, which is not to be on the spectrum. So I've had 2 counselors say that I probably am, but this one says I don't. So we're going to just believe that. So that's a snatching of the way too.
And that's an intentional snatching. Here, bird, come and take this seat.
Right. Please, here, birdie, I don't want to do this. Any birds available? Oh gosh, darn. The seeds are gone. So that can be problematic too. All right. So the second one, Sown on the rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, but has no root, endures for a while, and then when tribulation or persecution arises, falls away. Now, in context, it says falling away because of tribulation and trials. But in a marriage context, we see a lot of people white knuckling it.
Yes.
So when you're kind of talking about that in your groups, what does like white knuckling it mean?
It's going beyond like the typical, if let's say I can't remember something, so I put a sticky note up on whatever that thing is, or I set an alarm, or I send myself an email, or maybe I'm at my moment and I've scheduled all my things to do and I'm going to schedule all my reminders to my wife and I send them out on Sunday and then they're scheduled once a day for the whole week. Those things, that's just accommodating a thing that's, maybe you just can't remember. So you're making a way to make that. But if it's that forever, or if it's just, okay, well, I just didn't figure out how to do that. Or really the reality is you haven't connected. Let's go back to the vine. You haven't connected God, and there's no organic change. There is nothing.
It's box checking.
It's just going out. Mentally, I'm just not there. This is going to be, all right, walk the dog. I've cleaned up the kitchen. I sent an email to my wife. I got the groceries, right? It's just one more thing on the list of stuff to do. And that just makes it easy to forget, one. Number two, it can fall flat.
It's still back to a podcast not too long ago, and it's still like a plant. Here's my little plant. I put a little water in it and then stick it over in the sunlight and let the plant be happy in the sunlight, but not really interactive.
That's a good starting, right? If you're going from nowhere,
right?
That's a great starting. You just got to get moving.
But I like to be a person, not a plant.
Yes.
It's much better to be a person and not a plant. So it could also be like they receive it with joy. So sometimes we have couples that maybe there's not the stigma or the denial or the pushback. You're attacking me, you're accusing me with this label. Oh, it's awful. Oh, it's terrible. And there's like, sometimes there's the, wow, this makes a lot of sense. This gives us hope. And so at first there's like, okay, we'll read the books, we'll do the things. But I'll choose something that we have used a lot that we like, and that's the Emotionally Healthy Relationship course. Okay, so the Emotionally Healthy Relationship course, which you can find on YouTube, and it is free. It's free, y'all. It's free.
Get the book, though.
Get the book, get the day by day, get the workshop. You can do it on your own. But so you watch the video, it teaches scripts. Right? This is a community temperature reading. This is a stop mind reading. It shows you the skill. It tells you why you want to use the skill. It tells you how to use the skill. It role models in a wooden and creepy way how to do it, but you still get the role dance laughing because everybody said how weird and creepy it is. But it gives you the backboard. Wooden. Okay, but it's a well done program. Okay, so you go to the class, every Sunday night. You did your workbook to be prepared for the class. In the class, you do the one practice that well, this is how we did it when we did it through Zoom. You did your practice, and then the rest of the assignment, right? It's like, this is it. This is going to be the thing. This is the communication tips we needed. And then I say, well, are you practicing it? No, it's not working. Yeah, this isn't working. This isn't working for us.
Twice.
Well, how many times did you do it? Well, over the past 2 weeks, we've been really busy. So, like once, twice? How much would you say? Yeah, well, we're trying to do it organically. We're not really doing it the way you suggested we do, about sitting down. We're just trying to be organic about it. I was like, yeah, that's an excuse for we didn't do it. So if you have a tool and you don't practice it, then you just collected tools. That's the same if you have a tool shed and you go to Lowe's every week and you buy a new tool and you make it really pretty and you put it in your tool shed, but you don't use them or know how to use them.
It's like the man's Barbie case.
Yeah, it's just accessories.
Hey, look at
Right. So if you're just like receiving it with joy, this is going to be good, this label works, this makes sense of our whatever, but you're not going to actually use the tool and practice it, then when you need to use it, you don't have the time. If you don't practice it I always say from clinical or classroom to application, you've got to practice it in the clinical space. You got to practice it in the wooden way. Is it connecting at first? No, no one says it is. It's the tool to get you started. So
you can't do it without duress.
Exactly. Thank you. Exactly. You got to practice when there's not stress and duress. Thank you. So you do all this, you practice it, and then the very first time stress or duress comes, you haven't been practicing it. You haven't been doing it. And then this thing comes where you could have used it, and then it's like, oh, it didn't work. It's too hard.
You stumbled over the whole thing. You botched all the words up.
I don't want to do this anymore. It's dead to us. We're not finishing it. We're not doing it. So that's kind of and a little bit of hardship comes, a little bit of space, and then thinking that this is going to be easy. Like you've been married 10, 20, 30 years, and one new tool and one new book.
And 3 weeks later, you're going to be all better.
Right. You really got to change your mindset that if you are a neurodiverse couple, you're learning and accommodating forever. There's not an arrival point. I'm still studying and I have a doctorate. So I don't think I've arrived. I don't think I've learned everything that I could learn. So it's a little bit of a pet peeve if you don't hear a little bit of the frustration in my voice. When it's going to be like, we've done it, we've tried it, and you're really not. And some of that can be busyness. When I'm talking to couples and, there's a lot of legitimate complaint that there's not time together, and we sit down and just look at the schedule, and I was like, okay, well, we only need 5 or 10 minutes a day. And the couple's telling me they don't have 10 minutes every day to do this. That's a problem.
There's something else going on.
It's too busy. You've got too much stuff going on with kids, too much volunteer stuff. And so you might have to take a look at your schedule, and maybe as you're just beginning counseling, maybe something else has got to sit by the wayside, because if you do not have 5 or 10 minutes a day to practice a skill or to have a discussion, there's bigger reasons why you're not connecting. Now, if someone's running away and constantly involved in a special interest, and that's part of the reason of the busyness, well, then that's another discussion. So we're just kind of painting the picture that to do something and for it to take root, there's got to be repetition, practice, and grace for mistakes.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that, since if I were to give you this new skill and book and be like, okay, I expect you to do this right every time from now on. You've read it, you've watched the video, it's been explained to you. From this point on, from today forward, you shall do it properly and correctly, or it's a fail. What kind of motivation would you have to do it?
So do you remember learning cursive?
Yeah, I loved it though.
So if I was to have given you a pencil in kindergarten and said you need to write cursive perfectly, you remember you had to do
balls too.
Go up the thing, up, that's the line, and then you go down to the basement, and maybe this one went into the attic, and this one went to the halfway mark. But as you know, if you're just not learning basic print letters, you're not going from no letters to cursive letters. You just got a new pencil in your hand.
Right. So the first thing is learning how to hold the pencil correctly, which I never learned, by the way.
And then you got to move in stages. You're not just going to get a new thing and think that, oh, we're going to be really good or expect someone to be really good at this. Pick anything that you're learning, from a sport to a school subject. You just don't get to, just because you're grown up doesn't mean you learn faster.
Right. So would it be motivating or demotivating if every time we got together to practice skill and I told you every single time, every single thing you did that was wrong and how you did it, are you going to want to show up tomorrow and practice that skill again?
Well, no.
I saw your brain think something else.
You even had to ask the question.
Well, I saw your eyes and I could feel your brain thinking there was a harder, terser answer there, but the video's on. So thank you for that. So there's got to be, in this stage of learning, if you take it up and receive it with joy, you're practicing, you're giving each other grace and space. Like, also talk about what went right. So, if we're practicing this new skill, we would imagine it, and I usually say it takes a week or two to get it down. Also, give each other credit for what went well about it. Okay, we got 3 of the 5 done well. We didn't get off topic too much. It wasn't connecting, but it wasn't escalating. It was at least neutral.
It was at least neutral.
I mean, goodness gracious.
You went from negative to neutral.
That's half the battle right there too. So that's a little bit on that. So take it up with joy, but there's no root. Then a little thing happens, or to your check the box thing. So let's say you're coaching somebody and they're trying to figure out how to text their wife in the middle of the day, or remember to check in, or make a call, or whatever it is. And he set himself a reminder, and at 12:02 every day for 3 weeks, he's done that. And so she's expressed appreciation at first, like, you know what, I noticed that you're doing this more. However, I know at 12:02 every day, that feels a little rote and robotic. And so the effort's there, you are reaching out, but it's really not feeling connecting like you really care. It just feels like you're auto texting me. I'd like to kind of take it to the next level. And then the guy's like, okay, I'm done. Well, I tried. She just can't be pleased. She's just a crazy woman that expects too much of me.
Because the first statement of, I really like that, doesn't mean you're all done.
It's that starting point.
This is a whole, we're climbing a ladder, we're walking a journey, we're on a really long cruise. Pick something that takes a long time. And that's what this is. A spaceship to Mars.
Right.
Without light speed.
Without light speed.
Yes.
That's right. There's no light speed in this process. Trust me. I am told that a lot by you ladies. When are we going to get this going? I get it. There's no light speed.
This is like a raft from an ocean paddled by 2 people.
Oh, yeah. Ooh.
Sometimes there's waves. Sometimes the people paddle in opposite directions. Sometimes they hit each other with it. Sometimes they throw the paddle. Sometimes they use it for firewood.
You would not use paddles for firewood on a raft in the middle of the ocean.
I wouldn't, you're right.
Okay, all right, we're digressing. All right, the third, let's see. Third one is
Among the thorns.
Among the thorns. I lost my place. All right, has no root, persecution arises. Okay, for the one who is sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. So there's some vegetation maybe that's kind of come up through cracks and whatever, but also I'm thinking, because I've read some of the material you've done about husband being akin to farming, and then part of that taking care of the garden or the box. I mean, kind of give a little bit of that analogy, because that could be what's happening here. Like I'm thinking in my head, you got your garden box, you had good soil, you've been taking really good care of it for a while, at least enough that vegetation has come up, but you go on vacation for 2 weeks and no one's watching that. And all kinds of either critters have gotten in or things have sprung up. So kind of talk a little bit about the whole husband and farmer and gardens.
We were just out there earlier today and we looked at the okra plot, and almost everything but okra has grown.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's if I want a solid crop of okra, and the first shoots, the first things that come up after tilling that is going to be the weeds. For whatever reason, they grow faster. The grass, for me, only grows in the garden plot.
Yep.
And to keep your shoots from getting choked, from getting covered by something beside it, so they don't get the sun, you've got to go out there and gently, weed around it. You can't go and just be crazy, right? Because then you'll pull your own plant up. But you do have to be very selective on making sure that you're not allowing the stuff that's around it that you don't want to get in the way of the things you do want. And so you've got to be very intentional. You got to do it on a regular basis.
Routine,
right?
there's routine stuff.
There's just a thing you've got to do. And with anything, it gets laborious, right? I mean, in the spring, I see it every year. The spring, everybody goes out and they're all excited for spring plants, and they go out and plant them all. And then by June,
the garden's deserted.
This is hard. I don't want to do it anymore.
And even us, like when you grow okra, which all four of us love the okra, and so you don't take care of it, and then it's like 6 inches long. You can't eat it. I mean, you have to cut it off. It's too hard. It becomes a great dog toy. He loves to play okra, but it's not edible. So it did grow vegetation. The soil was right, but it grew. But if we didn't take care of it, now we just have unedible.
You've got to be time.
All right. So that's, I think, kind of what happens. Maybe you started well. Everybody's on board with the neurodiversity. We're doing some of our tools, and we've gone 6 months with no new incident. And also sometimes when things are going well or going a little bit better, it's a little bit easier to fall back into
electric garden.
And you're not doing maintenance anymore. From the men, it's almost like I hear well, she's off my back now. So, phew.
Right. That's actually the wrong.
Yeah, that's the wrong goal. So
the goal isn't to get you off your back. The goal is to flourish.
Right, because that's the fourth soil.
Right.
So if it's just a temporary short-term gain to just decrease the conflict and have a happier, more peaceful environment, but there's still not connection, there's still not maintenance, there's not repair when things go wrong, you're not going to have a viable edible garden.
You're not there for the fruit.
All right, so that leads us. So we have to add a new one in here because we were talking about, gosh, how many years has it been? 6, 7 years of the West to grow tomatoes?
Maybe 10.
Okay, so here in the South, usually most people can grow tomatoes pretty darn well. And usually people have tomatoes they're given away at church or among neighbors. That has not been Dan's.
In our garden, it's been nobody's capability.
Nobody gets any tomatoes. So kind of talk through this process, because I mean, if anybody is a well-intentioned and researched and take care of it gardener, it's Stan. I mean, a little bit too much at the beginning. We've come back in the pendulum and gardening is in its proper place. But I mean, as far as tending the soil and making sure it's watered and going down there and checking it, except for when we go on vacation, that's always a little bit of a problem. So I guess talk a little bit about the tomatoes, because we'll talk then about the invisible and tangible things that you've got to be paying attention to.
So from the very beginning, it was even the first year we put anything in, tomatoes would look great. You put them in, you put in your little tomato, they'd be about this big, and they would grow up, they'd flower, and you'd get, tomatoes that were size of your pinky nail. And
the soil looked good, the plant looked good, it flowered.
It was a nice, rich soil. They were growing well. You had your cages around them from a cover of Home and Garden. This was the cover. And then right as they got to the point you were ready to see this is going to turn out to be a great year, the leaves would start wilting. And the plant would just kind of fall over, and the fruit would quit growing. Eventually, by the time you pulled them up, because they would go all the way down, they'd flop over. You could tell the stem had hollowed out. It was just hollow. It wasn't
very sad.
It killed the tree from the leaves down to the root. And year over year, that was the same thing. I finally gave up. We had new people come to the garden. I said, don't plant tomatoes. You can grow anything here, but you can't grow tomatoes. Oh, we can grow tomatoes.
Nobody. No, not one.
Yeah, they all failed. I should have listened. So to fix all of this, I tried a lot of things. I fertilized it. It was a garden that we didn't put any kind of chemicals on, but because of the tomato thingy, there's got to be something we could do. So,
right, so it's supposed to all be organic at first, totally organic community garden.
So we got to find something. This is crazy. How can you not grow tomatoes? So we try those things. Oh, read the back of the bottle, try that, didn't work. Read this other thing, didn't work. When you buy the tomatoes from like Home Depot or Lowe's, they're usually brought in by a company, and the company here in Atlanta was called Bonnie Plants. They're based in Alabama. So I called Bonnie Plants. Hey, how come? Here's what I'm seeing. How come this happens? And they told me, it sounds like you've got like a fungus or something like that in the soil. It's been a couple of years ago now since I said, that's okay. What do I do? Well, you could try to, really heat the soil up. And so they suggested putting a black plastic cover on it, tuck it in really well, and leave it there throughout the summer, through the hottest part.
So you're just going to bake the soil.
We're just going to, it's going to roast. We're going to have roasted soil by the end of the summer. It's going to be tasty.
Roasted soil.
There might be some worms in there that'll just give it a good punch. But the idea was you get it to 130, 140 degrees, which is what they said. I don't remember the term for this, but I looked it up and read all about it. I had to.
Of course.
Because I had to make sure they weren't making it.
Had to get the books, had to do the research.
So I tried that. Didn't help.
Well, you even at one point replaced all of it. Didn't you go to the dump or the compost,
yeah,
whatever? I
dug all
the dirt out, started over.
All over. One of the challenges is that the place where we're at is also a floodplain. So every time it rains really hard, it covers the whole way, floods the whole thing. So if there was anything upstream, it just brought whatever it was that could have been in the soil back into the ground.
So you baked it to get rid of the whatever.
Changed all the soil.
Changed the soil. Then you tried putting some boxes out in our backyard so you could baby it a little bit more. That didn't work.
That didn't work because there wasn't enough sun.
Right.
This year, there's
this is try number 8 or 9. We'll see.
That gets more sun. But the point here is that it's been a very challenging time getting tomatoes here. Most anything else. We grew peppers, right? We grew okra, I grew spinach, I grew
peppers. I don't even eat peppers. We have so many peppers, we're giving them away everywhere we go. We're giving away peppers.
So many other things. We've grown cilantro and basil.
Corn even.
Corn. It's sad.
I'll talk about the corn massacre. You looked all upset thinking about the corn massacre.
Bad.
The corn massacre. So when that happens, it would be easy to say nothing's working. But in this situation, so we're still, you could never grow tomatoes again. That would be an option. But we're crossing our fingers. We'll see if its new location helps. So we were kind of thinking, what could some of the intangible, unseeable, unknowable things were? So we kind of made a list of what we thought that could be. It could be maybe stuff from your family of origin that's kind of creeped in, that's kind of become part of the family system. Each person's kind of doing something that was unhealthy from their family of origin and it hasn't been dealt with. There might be attachment wounds, either from your family of origin or attachment wounds between the married people. It could be neglect. It could be years and years and years of unmet needs. It could be the years and years and years, the toll of the escalated fights and conflict or conflict avoidance. It could be abandonment, emotional abandonment in the marriage. It could be indifference. It could be that stoicism. Too bad you have needs. You shouldn't have needs. Be like me. Be logical. Don't be emotional. You're too sensitive. Abuse of any kind, whether it's intentional or unintentional, it's going to have the same effect. Whether you mean to run somebody over with your car or you accidentally run over somebody with your car, the person is injured the same. It doesn't matter what your intention was at that point. Someone has bodily injuries. And then anything that's spiritual, emotional, religious, mental, psychological, sexual abuse that maybe came from your family of origin or is happening within the marriage, those are all going to be things that pastors, clinicians, counselors aren't going to see. Right? So you do all the things. You can, go to church, you can pray harder, submit harder, have more sex, go on dates, read all the books, go to intensives. But if these things aren't dealt with,
they still keep creeping in.
Right. So that's where we say there's individual work, there's things you can do individually, and then there's marital work. So if I have a problem of using alcohol, that is my problem that is impacting the marriage. It's not a marital problem. The alcohol abuse is not a marital problem. If I continued to do that and Dan comes to me and says, hey, Stephanie, I'm a little concerned about this, about your use of alcohol, how you talk or treat people, or the frequency, or you're using it to regulate your moods, that's not healthy. Why don't you try some medication? Why don't you get some counseling? Why don't we look into this? And I say, my body, my choice. I'll do it. It's just affecting me. I don't see it's a problem, but how I'm treating you or talking to you or neglecting you, or maybe money I'm spending or secrets, whatever, it's now impacted the marriage and impacted you. But who's the one that's got to do the main work? Me.
Now both of us, because I've got to get over it and you've got to.
Right. And it continues to happen.
Right.
So, I mean, even if you go to Al-Anon or whatever the support group is for people who live with people with an abuse or addiction, Narcanon, sex addicts, whatever the support group is, which they're all good. I'm not knocking those. I'm just saying you can go do that and go to all the support meetings you want. But if I'm not willing to change my behavior and I'm not willing to get help, you cannot fix our marriage if I refuse to change that behavior.
It takes two. Just like the guys in the raft. We're both going to get across the Atlantic on the raft. We have to paddle the same way.
Right. So those things are things that can be done. So if you're like, you know what, our marriage is in it's in dire straits, we're close to filing, we're close to separating, and you even if you put boundaries in place, a boundary cannot make someone do something. So if Dan says to me, Stephanie, if you continue to drink every night, I don't want to talk with you because you are mean to me, or you yell at me, or you cuss at me, or you throw things at me, or whatever. And I'm picking drinking because that's not something, in case you're wondering. No, that's never happened. But your boundary is, I don't want to talk to you if you're doing that, or you cannot drive the children. Once you start drinking, you're not allowed to drive the children. I'm not going to leave you home with the children. Or I'm going to go over here and I want to watch TV, but I don't want to spend time with you because I'm choosing not to be around what you're saying you're being. But that boundary, you're not boundarying me to make me stop. The boundary is about protecting you and what you're willing to deal with and put up with. You can't consequence me enough to make me change if I don't want to. Because if my heart is hard-hearted and I have compacted soil, I've got to do the tilling up, and it's got to be worth it to me, and I've got to make that choice. And if I'm the one with the abuse issue or the addiction issue, I'm not really caring what the marriage is like right now. I'm caring about me. And so even when we talk about boundaries, it's important to know, like, maybe a boundary Dan would say is like, I'm not calling in for work for you anymore and saying you're sick when you're really just hungover. I'm not lying for you anymore. I'm not covering for you at church anymore. That's your boundary, because you're protecting what you can do and what you're willing and no longer willing to do. And I still have to make the decision. And maybe if it continued, maybe if I was destroying things, maybe you might have to say, you need to not be in the house, if it escalates to that level. And so that's not about, some people even right now are like, oh, protect the marriage at all costs. You need to protect the people in the marriage. People first. God first, then people, right? All right, so getting to the healthy
So let's just say something. Some of those things rise up in every one of the schools.
Right.
That's who you are. It's part of you. However they showed up in your world, they exist with you right now. And no matter how good you are at any of the tools, chances are they're here tomorrow, right, and the next day, and the next day. So as the tooling and all of that stuff is becoming, hopefully, a greater presence in your day, these things are regularly wearing off, but they don't just disappear any more than anybody learns to write cursive the first time they put a pencil in their hand. And
you can't weaponize it. So some things I hear a lot if I'm working with AS men, and maybe their wife has come from a difficult family background or maybe has some kind of sexual abuse that happened prior to the marriage, it's very easy to dismiss, well, her issues are because of her past. So I'm absolved of anything that's happened in this marriage. It's really not that bad. It's really just she's too sensitive, or she has all this abuse, or she was raped and had this trauma, and she just can't get over the trauma. This really has nothing to do with me. And that's very dismissive and very hurtful and very harmful. Because a lot of times, sadly, people who have come from dysfunctional or harmful backgrounds do end up with people who are emotionally unavailable. So that's kind of part of it. Now, that's not our background. I mean, we both came from my dysfunctional family was at least fun dysfunction. Yes. It was just weird, but not abusive. All right, so the fourth soil, sown in good soil, is the one that hears the word, understands it, bears fruit, and yields 100-fold, another 60 and another 30. So I don't know what all those measurements are, but it's doing well. It's a sunflower bumper crop. It's like a field. It's continuing to grow.
Like the fields of grain we saw in South Dakota.
Was South Dakota? I thought it was Nebraska.
You're coming back down.
Oh, yeah. Dan, we had to stop because the fields of grain were so amazing. We stopped because there was a red farmhouse.
Oh, area.
Perfect Midwest.
I got out and just looked at it.
Yes, we did. And took a picture of it.
Yes.
And it comes up on our Google Photos. So to get that, people push back a lot when I talk about, it's frustrating when people put the marriage as like a title, like it's about the marriage. It's also about the relationship between two people. If we're not friends because we're antagonistic or we're in enemy mode or expectations, all of that, if we can't be at the base friends, how do we work on, quote, the marriage? Friendship is the basis of everything. So if the relationship has gotten so unbearable or suffering or miserable that a couple is living in different rooms or separating, and one of the parties says, right now what I can give you is friendship, that's a gift. It's a gift. How do you build a marriage without friendship?
Because that's how you met.
Well, you hope. The most part you like each other.
Most of us didn't wake up with somebody we met or met them.
Although there is an advent of online dating now.
Right, but
so
you're online there is a relationship. It isn't zero to marriage.
Right.
Maybe the steps went really fast, but it was not zero to marriage. Right? It was, well, let's at least agree, right?
You enjoy spending time together. So don't hear me say, because traditional marriage therapy is like, just spend time together, go on dates, spend a lot of money, go on vacations, have a lot of sex, and everything works out. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you have to at least start with maybe having a coffee together and that going well. Being able to go to the store or the Costco together and that going well. Being able to, I know, because that's what you say. Our Costco is the Costco, in case you didn't know. Our Costco is the Costco. It's going and doing those things together and being able to spend that time as companions and friends. It's got to go deeper at some point. But especially if I'm thinking if it's the neurotypical spouse who's in a very hurt, wounded, exhausted, mental health is not in a good space because of the marriage. Like talking about how much sex you're going to have and what room you're sleeping in is like the least of your problems. There's a much more foundational.
Right, having breakfast together probably ought to be
right, as you talk about it, and it's safe. Like it's got to be safe to do that, but you've got to start with friendship, or you don't have, quote, the marriage that you want.
Right, because just wanting the marriage is really not like much. It's I want the facade. I want this thing to be around me to present, but the consistency isn't there. It's a hollow Easter bunny, right? It was that disappointing moment when you bit into that Easter bunny and you realize
it's not solid. I got the cheap one that was hollow. I wanted the solid one. Well, back in the day when you liked milk chocolate.
Yeah.
But and so sometimes couples, this sounds like super noble, and I'm expecting negative feedback after I say this, but it sounds very noble to say, divorce is not an option. Divorce is off the table. I would die miserable. I would give up my house. We'd be homeless before we would get divorced. Okay, when you say divorce is not an option, that's not talking about how you're going to build a relationship. You're talking about what you won't do. You're not talking about what you're going to do, how to repair, how to rebuild. And I'm the one that's fighting for this marriage. How are you fighting for the marriage? What are you doing? What are new behaviors? What are the skills? What are the tools? Just in your earnest of hearts, really wanting it, doesn't do anything.
You're being very dramatic.
I know. So you'll only get to see the dramatics if you watch the YouTube. I say volumes with my face that you don't hear on the podcast. So as we're kind of wrapping up and having the I guess we got to spend a little more time on the healthy soil. So the healthy soil is friendship. It's dealing with conflict.
Kindness.
Oh, kindness. It's not, this is another pet peeve, when a spouse says, hey, I'd like you to just kind of check in, it's kind of a joke around here. Where's Dan? Where's Dad? It's nice to know. Send a text. We're going to leave the house.
You're in the backyard. No. That's not hard to find.
That's not all the time. Like, oh, the truck's gone. Where did he go? But to say, hey, I'd like you to check in, or if you've gone on a business trip, can you call me or reach out to me? Oh, you're so controlling. Like, no, that's called being cordial, being courteous. You mentioned kindness. It's not just avoiding conflict. If you never handle anything and never talk about it because it's going to lead to conflict, you're not handling conflict. You're just constantly brushing it down. You're just sweeping it under the rug. Just got to make sure I don't ruffle Dan's feathers and everything will be okay. That's not really peace. That's not true peace. If you're not building joy together, right? And doing things that are neutral, time with the family, time spiritually. So there's all these things, the good soil, time together, working on it, continuing, cooperative, being a team. As they all say, there's no I in team.
We're paddling a raft across the ocean.
Right. There's no lone rangers. It's got to be working together in tandem as a team, a partnership. And then, we're, as far as gender roles go, sometimes in this relationship, you got to lean into who has the strength in something and not necessarily like what's the guy thing to do and what's the girl thing to do. We've kind of talked about that before. I actually take out the trash and take the trash down the hill, and Dan does 98.999% of the cooking. I get to crock pot every once in a while, or heat up leftovers. But and so the things that we are both good at that we can do around our marriage and family life based around our work and the time we want to be together, sometimes that's how you pick your chores, is what is the strength of each person, and stop trying to compare yourself to neurotypical marriages. That's like the number one killer.
Yeah, we're not Disney.
No, not Disney, not Hallmark. I mean, there were some rough marriages in the Bible. When you talk about a biblical marriage, there's a lot of interesting things that happened in the Bible in marriage. So anything you want to say, oh, you have this, I want to talk about this. Dan was recently at a conference and they were talking about this communication theory. I don't even know how to pronounce that.
It's a Johari window.
Okay. Well, I'll probably have to do a whole thing on this.
I think we do a whole thing.
Okay, just give us like the synopsis and we'll go deep on another.
So it's a quadrant. You can look it up. It's called the Johari window. There's a lot of stuff online. And what it is, it's the amount of you that's known to the parties. If you think about your whole self, who knows what aspect of that is split up across n number of people. there is that very public, I know it and everybody else does. This might be
your job, career?
Yeah, my hair, whatever's on Facebook. I wrote it there and now everybody else does it. Except I don't use Facebook.
No, he doesn't.
Then there is something I know about me and something I'm keeping hidden. That is, private.
You're doing it on purpose, keeping it hidden.
It's, something for whatever reason. It doesn't have to be even a bad reason, right? So there's just things that I don't, you don't tell anybody. Sometimes it's because it's uninteresting. Then there's the other areas that are unknown to me, but known to somebody else. And this is an area for like you might call it a blind spot. In fact, that's what
it says right here on the thing, blind spot.
And that's something like if you're in a counseling session or you're coaching or something like that, something that someone would bring to your attention and say, did you notice? And then there's those moments, the other moments that are unknown to you and unknown to everybody. And this, you could probably dig into a lot of reasons. It could be something that you just plain old forgot. Like, what did I eat for lunch yesterday? And I was all by myself. So now nobody knows. But it could be something more involved, like some kind of trauma you forgot that surfaces because of, I heard a song or I smelled a smell.
Thing.
Right.
Or it could sometimes be how I'm listening to Just the Guys and I'm learning information for the very first time.
Well, it wouldn't be unknown to me.
Well, it was unknown to me. You knew it, but almost you said kind of in the verbal processing in the space of that.
It showed up in the moment for me.
And it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. So we're going to talk more about that because that is important to healthy soil and growth. We need to kind of round out the show. Today's show is show number 95.
How do you round out a show?
Round it out, end it up, wind it up. I don't know.
I think you.
Okay, we're going to round it out, wind it up. We're going to do something.
I just don't know what to round up the show.
Round it up. Oh, I'm thinking like Woody's Roundup.
Is that how you end something?
You don't know. Stop. Okay. So you gotta do that. Okay.
I was confused.
We are finishing the show. A couple of things. All right. The parsing and the syntax and all nice and right for you. Gosh, I got silly and now I don't know where I was going. Oh, it's the 95th show. And we started recording so many shows and just putting them in for our sound engineer to do. The 100th show snuck up on us and we didn't kind of announce that, yay, the 100th show is here. So this month, when this airs, the last show of the month, which I think is Dr. Mona Kay, who is from Neurodiverse Love. She sponsored the Neurodiverse Love Conference and she has the Neurodiverse Love podcast. She is our 100th show. And her topic is, as a neurotypical, things she wished she would have done differently, things she wished she would understand, and maybe some of her mistakes that she made in her neurodiverse relationship. So that's our 100th show. And by that time, we'll have probably hit 75,000. We're really close even right now, and it's a couple of weeks away. So we'll have been at 75,000 downloads, which is exciting, our 100th show. And so we don't do this or say this often, but when we first started the show, we were funding it. We were funding it all. And you might think, well, it doesn't really cost money to put a podcast up. Well, we don't sound engineer it. So there is, we have our sound engineer, Scott. And if you've heard us talk about Reverend Scott now, I think you're ordained now, Scott. He works for Fire Bible, which if you're watching the YouTube, you'll see this. If you're listening to the podcast, you want. Fire Bible is a very awesome study Bible. And Scott Eckert, who is our sound engineer, he works with Fire Bible, and the organization tries to get different, not translations, but
study notes
and in various languages. Yes. And then gets the study Bible in various languages, gets it to Indigenous people and pastors, and study Bible, gets them in various languages and dialects, and then disperses them. So when you support our podcast, we are making no money. We do this out of ministry and out of a heart's desire to help and to spread the word and help neurodiverse Christian couples. But if you go to our website, www.christian neurodiversemarriage.com. Does I say it right?
Yes.
Awesome. Then you can go to the very front page. It says donate now. Any gift helps. It costs about between $60 to $100 per podcast, depending on how many edits. Like they have to stop it or redo things, or the dog barks and he has to edit out sounds. So when you're supporting the podcast, you're not supporting us monetarily in any way, shape, or form. We make our income through our coaching practice. This is how we keep ministry. We're not going to do a Patreon. We're not doing a subscription because we want to keep it open. I did some stats today just to kind of look and see what was going on. Our geolocation is showing it in about 30-something countries. I've had people reach out that are in the military or mission work. They don't have any resources to them, and this is the only source that they're getting for some kind of information. So I'm very excited about that. So if you decide to donate, that's great. We've also been trying to get our social up, which Dan hates social media, but it's a necessary evil in this world. How you can help is on one of our socials, if you like and subscribe and leave comments, that helps.
And on the podcast, go to the podcast.
Go to the podcast.
Whatever your feed is, whatever you.
Right. If you're an Apple Podcast or iHeart or Spreaker or Podbean, whatever they are. Spotify, you can go there, like it, subscribe to it. If you want to leave a comment, something you liked about it. And then we might even use a quote, maybe a listener quote. But if you would help us out in that way, you can follow us now on YouTube. Under my name, because I originally had the YouTube page, Dr. Stephanie C. Holmes. The C is very important. I had no idea I had such a generic name, but there's a lot of Stephanie Holmes out there. So Stephanie C. Holmes is how you can find our YouTube. We're kind of working now on today, like incorporating the video in this. If you prefer to watch the whole video, sometimes that might be 10 or 15 minutes when we have a guest on. So we have YouTube. What else do we have? LinkedIn. If you follow Dan on LinkedIn, that would be for computer stuff. So Dan does computer stuff and IT
and I don't do much.
And he's not on there often. So you won't get Dan through LinkedIn. But I have a page, Dr. Stephanie C. Holmes. We have Neurodiverse Christian Couples page on LinkedIn. We just started Twitter, and I think that's at NDCC. Or if you get on Twitter and look for Neurodiverse Christian Couples or at NDCC, I think that's there. Did I forget Facebook, Neurodiverse Christian Couples? Is that all the social we're on?
We're on Instagram.
Instagram, it's kind of floundering there on Instagram, but we are, I do have an intern, a student at the university who is helping me out and getting some stuff on Instagram. So those are all the different ways you can follow us and kind of see what's going on. If you want to be added to our newsletter, you can go to the website, the ChristianNeurodiverseMarriage.com, hit contact, and be added to our newsletter. If you want to know like where we're speaking, or we have new groups available, or about new blogs or things like that, you can reach out and do that. We've recently added the blog on the web page. So right now there's about 7 or 8 on there, and it's not always just us. We have coaches that we're training, or people maybe you've heard on the show, like Dr. Gill. He wrote 2 on attachment. Jeremy and Charity Rochford, they wrote something. Reverend Iris Knapp, she has something on there. Nicole Marr, who has also written for Focus on the Family. So you can check that out. We're trying to get articles and some blogs. We have the podcast, the YouTubes. So we're trying, and be patient with us in answering email, because Dan works a full-time job as the senior vice president of IT. I run a full-time coaching job. We're planning a wedding in addition, and work and life and volunteering. And we also like to do small groups and things at our church, like try to have a life, and we try to do stuff together. It's not podcasting or planning for podcasting. Oh, and we're writing 2 books. Let's just throw that in there too. So that's all that's kind of going on with Neurodiverse Christian Couples. This, I guess, going on right now. And I guess we can wrap it up. Yeah. Let's see if we get it. Let's go.
That's why.
Wrap it up. What about wrap it up? You like that better? Instead of round it up,
right,
wrap it up?
Wrap it up.
Okay, good. All right.
I think
We got the right phrase now.
I
Okay.
think rapid
I know,
is
like
what you do.
mix them sometimes.
Yes.
I love to do that.
I'm not going to round it out.
Okay, we're not going to round it out. We're going to wrap it up.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if you got it.
What am I getting?
Our tagline.
Oh, so as always, thank you for coming, watching YouTube and all those other social medias, and there is hope for your journey.
No. It's not.
It is.
It's not
Yes,
hope
there's
for your
hope for your
journey.
journey.
Nope. That's not the tagline.
Really?
Okay. So thank you, listeners, and there
is hope for your future.
there you go.
Yes.
There's hope for your
There's hope
future,
for your-
and you're not alone on this journey.